And today, most people, when they meet me, say that they wouldn't know at first sight or by seeing me, listening to me, that I have an autistic spectrum disorder. And I think a good analogy is with language, that when you learn a second language, very often you want to fit in to that society, and you want to, as far as possible, speak in such a way that you eliminate your accent. And so I guess in a way I have learned social language so well that I can speak it more or less without an accent today. And I would spend a lot of time in libraries, and one of the kinds of books I loved reading particularly were autobiographies, because I wanted to learn so much about what a human life looked like and what kinds of lives were possible, what kind of life I would have myself. And when I wrote Born on a Blue Day, one of the first anecdotes I give in the book was the experience of going into the library for the first time and seeing all of the books, hundreds and thousands of books, all with different names on them. And as a young kid with autism, my first thought was that the names were there because they were describing a life. And that if I looked for long enough and hard enough among the shelves, I would find a book with my name on it as well. And would be able to open it and find out what was going to happen, because I hate surprises. But I think I'm pretty well off not knowing what's going to happen. I think it's for the best that way. It's more interesting and more exciting, even if it is sometimes more frustrating and frightening as well. And so I spent all of this time in libraries. I read a great deal. Books were very important to me even then. It can be very difficult within a system to nurture minds that do work in a way that is perhaps very different from others. And for me, the process of growth and self-discovery came more through traveling. I went to Eastern Europe. I went to a small country called Lithuania, which was formerly a part of the Soviet Union. And I lived there for almost a year. I taught English. I worked at a volunteer center. And I realized for the first time that it was possible for me to really fit in, because for all my eccentricities, the Lithuanians thought it was just part of being British. And so that was my excuse. I'm sorry, I'm from Britain. And so this really gave me a huge boost of confidence. I learned so many skills, social skills. I made friends. And I realized what it was like to fit in, both the thrill of it and, of course, the danger of it as well. You want to keep what is unique about yourself, even as you reach out to others. And it's a delicate balancing act. And but it's a fascinating process. I started to think about my future. And when I was 25, I went to Oxford one day. Oxford is, for those who don't know much about England, a very famous city. They have church spires, but most of all they have a huge university there. It's one of the great seats of learning in the Western world. And there was a museum there. And inside the museum is one of the blackboards that was used by Albert Einstein. His equations are written in chalk. And I sat opposite that board on March 14th, 2004. March 14th, which is, of course, Pi Day in the States, 314. And I sat down. There were mathematicians from Oxford University, I think half a dozen, sat in front of me. a bit of a distance apart with sheets of paper. And when someone gave the signal, I started to recite the digits of the number pi. And I recited this number, and I recited it, and I recited it, and I recited it. And I didn't stop until I had recited 22,514 digits. I did all of this from memory. It's a number I had learned off by heart over the Christmas period, the winter previous to that March. I found the digits on the internet, printed by a supercomputer in Tokyo, and I'd print them off onto sheets of A4, and I'd spend days reading them and learning the numbers. And when I learned the numbers, when I was reading the numbers having their own colors and shapes and textures, these would knit together and form landscapes full of different colors, full of emotion, full of life. And it felt such an amazing experience to be able to share that beauty of this number, of these numbers in pi, with the wider world. Because pi, of course, is a number that occurs everywhere. It's in the circumference of a dime. It's in the circumference of planets that are out in the universe. It's one of the numbers that's written into the fabric of our universe. But its digits, most people, of course, don't know, apart from 314. And so for those 5 hours and 9 minutes that I was reciting this number in front of an audience, in front of a public, aside from the mathematicians who were checking to make sure I didn't get any wrong, I was able to share that beauty. And one of the things that really struck me was how much there was a process of connection. Because there were people, I was told afterwards, I was so involved in the process at the time that I didn't really take it in. But people in the audience were very attentive. Some were even crying. And there were journalists who had come along, who'd read about this event and wanted to see it for themselves. And they asked these people, why are you crying? These are just numbers. And they said something that really moved me and made me realize that this event had been a tremendous success that I could never have foreseen. And they said that it's like a spiritual experience. It's almost like somebody is reciting scripture, because this is something that is coming from the heart. It's something that's heartfelt, and it's something that is communicating something that's very deep and something that we would not otherwise have access to. And I realized then that I had this ability to share what I lived and what I felt and what I lived with others in a way that was accessible. That in spite of the fact that most people aren't autistic and don't see numbers in colors and don't have this relationship with language that I have, that they don't come from a poor part of London, they don't have all of these brothers and sisters, everyone has their own history, and yet it was possible for these people in Oxford on that day to listen to me, to listen to those numbers, and to be deeply moved by the experience. And so I decided that I would write, and I would write a book, and that book became Born on a Blue Day. And as a consequence, I was able to go into a library and find that book with my name on it 20 years later. And it's called Born on a Blue Day, for those who don't know, because I was born on a Wednesday, and Wednesdays are always blue, as you should know. As Natalie kindly mentioned, Born on a Blue Day did very well. And that was a huge surprise to everyone who was involved in the project. I wrote the book 5 years ago, in the summer of 2005. And there was very little editing. I knew the story so well, of course, because it was my own. And a lot of the critics were astonished at the fact that it was, as they saw it, very well written. And I think that goes to show that it is possible for even people with disadvantages, or people who have come from different periods of development, different backgrounds and so on, to find a language that is accessible and that perhaps is beautiful too. And for me, the highest praise is when someone says that something that I've done is beautiful. For me, as for Einstein, beauty is truth. And the closer we get to beauty, the closer we get to being true to ourselves and to our world. When they would get a sum wrong, they were told straight away that it was wrong, and they'd made a mistake. They weren't necessarily told how they had come to make the mistake or how to correct it. They were told that they were wrong, and they were given the right answer. And one of the things I talk about in Embracing the White Sky is intuitions for numbers as well, because it's not just in language, but in numbers as well, that everyone seems to have intuitions for how numbers work. And we find that if you give children sums and let them develop intuitively a feel for how big a number is, that they'll get more and more accurate as they go along. So rather than simply saying, no, you're wrong, to a sum, say, for example, you give a kid a sum very simple, like 5 times 4, and they say 18 or 21. Rather than saying, no, that's wrong, say to them, nearly, it's 20. And you're giving them a sense, intuitively, of what 20 feels like, what 20 looks like, as compared to 2 times 5, which is 10, which is this